All right, everybody, welcome back to the Say by the Bellerin post game. We wish we had better news for you. We don't. Everything that we talked about at the halftime, all the optimistic things, all just seem to just kind of dissolve. Arsenal gives up a late goal on a corner. Again, this has been the story of them for all the good that we've seen under Mikel Arteta. Giving away late leads, giving away leads at any time has been the Achilles heel of this club. It was again today. They had a 1-0 lead. They gave it up on a very suspect goal for the draw. And then, again, we talked about them, Ryan, coming slowly out of the half. Not so bad this time, but when we expected them to kind of take the game to Spurs midway through late, it wasn't. There was just no punch.
No, there was literally nothing. We didn't have any control of the game at all. We had nothing going forward. I don't understand what our strikers or forwards were doing in that second half. They just, anytime one of the fullbacks got the ball, they dropped deep for a short pass rather than trying to get into the box. And we played like we didn't want to win. We just looked like we was playing for the draw.
We talked about this. We've talked about this a lot. The midfield options, very, very slow, are very limited. This is a game, we're going to bring up a name from a ghost, who's on the Arsenal roster, who have yet to see Mesut Ozil. This is a game where they really needed him, if nothing else, for depth, for rotation. It does look like we're seeing Dani Ceballos, Granit Xhaka going out week after week after week after week, having to play 90 minutes. And it's catching up to them. Part, as we said, there was no service. The strikers, we'll talk about Lacazzet in a moment, but no thrust, no control through the midfield. You talked about it, Ryan, at the halftime. And again, are they just wearing out? Are they? There's just, again, no punch.
It just shows a real lack of creativity in our midfield. We just don't seem to create enough chances for our forward players. Like, no matter what runs they make, neither of our midfielders want to play it. They just seem to be passing sideways or backwards. And I know they've played a lot of games in a short amount of space, and it doesn't help when you've got Guendouzi's situation and Ozil's situation. But surely you've had 4 days or a few more extra days rest than Spurs have, and you look like the team that played yesterday. Our midfield just lacks something. I can't put my finger on it, but it lacks so many things right now. It's like energy and creativity and someone who can put fear into the defender's face when they're running towards a goal. We don't have anyone that can score from midfield. And it's tremendously hurting us right now.
Yeah, and Dean, we talked a lot about this. We talked about a midfield makeover. It's been a topic on the pod for months now. You brought something to our attention just to kind of add to an already down day. But you saw a Thomas Partey tweet, kind of showing some rah-rah, some allegiance to Atletico Madrid, as if we already needed bad news.
Yeah, someone pointed out to me that he'd put something on Instagram praising the win for Atletico and said, "Oh, next year we will be there again" or something, and he added in the Champions League Instagram page. Obviously, I've put across my kind of thoughts on it, but I know you guys kind of don't see it the same way I did. It got to me a bit, but I think it's more salt in the wound due to the result that it kind of may have thrown me. But, it was there and it wasn't very pleasant to see, really.
Yeah, and I'm going to stay with you. I mean, Ryan just talked about lack of creativity, lack of spark, where Thomas Partey's name and lack of physicality, a drive through the midfield. But let's go back to the back line. Again, we were, maybe it's our fault, we can blame ourselves, but we were praising Mustafi for his consistency. He did not have a good match, but to be fair, none of the back three had a good match today.
No, it was, I don't know, it was a bit of a shocker. It's just one of those, things where we seem to be doing so good, and we are hyping up players that are really sort of meeting and exceeding expectations we have for them, and then suddenly, boom. Typically, within a game like this, of this magnitude for us as Arsenal fans, and just where we are at the minute with the restart, as well as it being a North London derby, this is the last thing you want to see. And you know, I was properly hyping up Mustafi with you at the top of the hour, at the top of the show, and then he goes and does this and says that, no, hold my beer. I'm going to show you something different. And I just feel we were all having an off day today. Not we all, but the squad. They just seem to, you know, Aubameyang was getting no service up there on the wing. And then you bring off, I know he was on a card, but you bring off Pepe for Saka rather than taking off Lacazzet and putting Orba down central and putting Saka in his normals. But, you know, just things just didn't seem to be clicking today. Once that goal went in, and it was a rocket of a shot from Lacazzet. You know, I didn't get to obviously say any of this at half time. I kind of missed out on that. But once that went in, we got our confidence back. But as soon as that kerfuffle happened, you know, between David Luiz and Kolasinac, who's another one that just didn't seem to be on it at all today, it just went downhill. And, you know, Mustafi did not have a good game. But as you say, I don't think many, if any of them did.
And again, what I think was the most startling to all of us, Ryan, I'm going to go back to you, or Dean, you feel free to jump in. This is a North London derby, and there was no sense of the moment. There was no sense of the importance. We just kept shaking our heads and looking cross-check. This is a bloodless, I'll use the term, this was a bloodless performance from Arsenal today, probably the flattest of any match since they came back from the COVID.
Yeah, it was pretty gutless, to put a word to it. They just didn't show any kind of fight or passion for the badge against them. Not it's just we showed no. I'll just go back to the game last season when we beat them 4-2. The amount of passion that they showed in that game, and it was so completely different for this game. It's like they were scared of the occasion, scared of losing, scared of trying too much and then making mistakes, and then it inadvertently made them make mistakes, and the pressure got to them, and it was just a bit heartless from most of them. I don't want to name names, but I can't say anyone had a performance that caught the eye.
All right, and Dean, let's talk about that. You know, there are names, we can name names. This is our show, right? There are players who have one leg out the door, one leg still in with the club. We saw performances, you know, let's start with Kolasinac. You know, is he going to stay? Is he going to go? You know, Mustafi, as we talked about in the pregame, it seemed the manager was trying to support him, but we've heard reports for weeks that he could be going, now for months, really. Danny Ceballos, the same thing. Is he going to stay? Is he going to go? And are we seeing that? Is that uncertainty now that we're only about 2 weeks away from the end of the season creeping onto the pitch, you think?
I'd like to think not. I'd like to think that the players that play for us have got a little bit more class than that, to just sort of, you know, it's kind of one of those things where you're in a job and you don't really like your job and you know you're going to be leaving soon, so you kind of don't care, really. And I don't want to think that our players are doing that, but I don't think you're far off with some. I mean, we saw it with certain players back in the day. We said we felt they were losing traction when they knew they were off. Alexis being one. A lot of people had that kind of vibe with him. And a lot of people are saying the same with Mesut as well. You know, and you know, that's why he's not being played, etc., etc. But you got people. I just feel that I think it's more to do with the state of where we are with this season and COVID and the restart, and just I think despite the break these players have had, they've all been busting arse to stay fit. They've all been doing, you know, and they are professional athletes, but fatigue can still set in. And, you know, this has been a lot. And I know we're used to having 3-day matches and all that because of the way we're set up by UEFA, etc., with Europa. And then, but still, some of these games, and I know we had more of a break than Spurs as well. And that kind of throws me. because knowing they had a game at a shorter period than us, and yet they still look more on it than us. I think you could look at players like Kolasinac, and you could look at players like Lacazzet, and you could think that. But I don't know, just part of me just doesn't want to believe that that's possible, to be honest with you. I just feel maybe they're just mentally not with it right now.
That could be. I mean, we don't know. We don't know the situation. We don't know the COVID situation. We learned that the Man City game that there might have been players who couldn't train. We know there's, in Pepe's case, he's got a newborn in his household. But just looking at the players, as we said, who are on the fence, are they going to stay? Are they going to go? This is not a recommendation for them. If you're trying to make that decision to look at a North London derby and see this kind of result, if you're Mikel Arteta, what's your takeaway, Ryan? How are you? It seems like week to week result. Like after the first two matches, certainly after Brighton, we're saying blow it all up, and then they ran on a 3-week streak, and like we're starting to pull players back. We had that big list, and then we started saying, well, maybe this guy should stay. Maybe this guy should stay. After today, what do you say?
I think today's performance will open Arteta's eyes to a few of the players, and a few that he might have wanted to keep, but now I think he's probably going to see him as, you know what, you're not that reliable for me. Mainly Mustafi, Ceballos, they didn't show up today at all. After all the praise we've been giving them last few weeks, to put in that performance like they did today was criminal. And then I think Arteta's going to look here and think, the biggest game of Arsenal season, you ask any fan what game they look at when the calendar is released, it's Spurs. And you turn up and play like that for an Arsenal team. I know we have not had a great season, but under Arteta, things are improving. And then you go out like that and perform like you're playing for Emery. I think Arteta's going to open his eyes to a few players now and probably be done with them.
All right, Dean, let's go back to you. Again, we probably shouldn't dwell too much on the game. It's done. We want to pick at a bad meal, so to speak. But let's take Ryan's point. We were already talking about Arsenal being aggressive. In some ways, this kind of pushes it out. I don't want to bring this up, but it deserves. I mean, we can't avoid it. We've kind of built a successful summer, and it's going to be a very abbreviated summer. Now we're hearing it could be just 2 weeks before the clubs come back, around keeping Aubameyang. Does a result like this in going down to 9th now and seeing European football at risk change his thinking, in your opinion?
Well, first of all, I just want to kind of echo what Ryan said. It was on my mind that Arteta was probably looking at some of these players during this, match, and as the magnitude it is, and has kind of set his mind on thinking twice about certain people. That did cross my mind before he said that just now. I completely agree with that. In terms of Aubameyang, we've had these rumours and the thing that he wants Champions League football, or he's not going to go. He wants to first make sure we get Champions League, then he'll decide. Personally, I feel that he'd already made a decision, and I said all along, I think he wants to stay here. I think it's all about getting what he deserves, as it's going to probably be his last big contract. There was a story recently, I think today or yesterday, that he will stay purely because he understands and loves the project Arteta's building, and they have a close-knit friendship. And so I'm gonna go with that, and I'm going to follow that train and say I believe that's the case. I don't think he's up. I mean, I don't doubt. I looked at him today and I thought, he's getting. I said it when we were watching the game. He's getting fed up, and I can see that when you're a player as good as he is, and you've got players that just aren't trying or seemingly aren't trying, and you're there in the position you're given by your manager, and you're not bitching about it, and you're trying your best to play from that position because that's how good you are, but you're getting no service, you're getting no reciprocation from your teammates. It's going to be frustrating, and I wouldn't blame him if it, slightly crossed his mind. Could I get better somewhere else? I deserve better. Could I get that much better service, that much being elsewhere? But to be honest, I don't feel he wants to go anywhere. I just feel it's a frustration thing. So I can't see him looking. I genuinely believe he wants to stay, and I genuinely believe he is staying with us.
All right, Ryan, let's look back to this. I mean, we're two paths that we can take here. I'm going to take you back to a topic that you went into in great detail on one of our pods. I believe it was before the COVID break, way back in February, where, when Arteta started, and we said it in the pregame, his first 7 matches, 5 draws out of 7 matches, only 1 victory. And we kind of threw up our hands and said, well, he's got a big project. Emery really left a mess for him. He's done an admirable job of kind of raising the level of play. But, you were saying way back then, when we thought there was no chance of European football, that maybe it wasn't the worst thing in the world, that like playing on Thursday in some cases put you at a disadvantage because you could never get ahead of your rivals. You couldn't play on Wednesday. You couldn't play in the midweek. If you were playing for a position in the league, you couldn't put 3 points on in your table in the standings and let your rivals catch up to you. We're back. I don't want to talk about it, but here we're back into that discussion. Obviously, they're going to fight. They have 3 matches left. They still have a chance of getting back into Europe, but it's looking a lot shakier. Play the devil's advocate. What's the value? I mean, if they finished 9th, they're not in it. What then?
Yeah, I just want to go to the chat because someone called Rizzy Rez put in, the last 2 games could have cost us Europe. And I totally agree.
Yeah.
And I don't think we're going to get Europe now. I think we're going to finish where we are. And it's just too much of an ask for everyone else to drop points and then for us to win every single game, because we've got City in between as well in the FA Cup. And I think maybe we should just stay out of Europe for a season. Hopefully it doesn't affect much with the targets we want not playing in Europe. But if we can stay out of Europe for a season and mount a proper title charge or a charge up the table, similar to what Chelsea did in 2010, not 2010, they finished 10th, sorry. And they finished lower in the table, didn't get Europe, signed Kante and someone else, and they finished like 2nd, I think it was, or they won the league that season. And Leicester, when they won the league, they had no Europe. The build-up of games when you're playing in Europa, and for what it's worth, if we got qualified for Europe, we'd finish 7th at best, I can see. And then we got to play in the qualifying games, which start before the season even starts. So we're starting earlier than everyone else. And I can just see us getting to the end of next season and gassing ourselves out and not being able to push further up the table. And I just think maybe a season out of Europe would be best for us at the moment.
All right. Kind of putting a dress again, just trying to put dressing on a bad meal. Dean, let's go back to you though. The window, let's talk about this. We talked a little bit about it in the pregame. From what we're reading, could be only 2. I mean, the break, not the window. The break could only be 2 weeks. So they're going to finish, and then, I guess there's going to be a delay because the Champions League has to be sorted. But the players get a 2-week break, and then they have to come back and start training for the new season. Looking forward, regardless of where they finish, whether somehow they claw through these last 3, they beat Liverpool, and they've got to beat Liverpool in the next match. Let's talk about that too. It all starts with that. Somehow they do it. Somehow they make their way up to 7th place. They get into Europe. They got to go up 2 spots in the table. Again, whether they get it or not, they need to rebuild the spine of this club. And if we look, and we talked about it, if we look at all the targets, people that they've mentioned, people like Mark Rocca, people like Thomas Partey, some of the forwards. Obviously they're going to rebuild the back line, even with, they've got Murray in, they're going to keep Luis, William Saliba's in, at least 2 more. If Kolasinac goes back, Malang Sarr has been a target. A lot of rebuilding on the back, a lot of rebuilding right up the middle. Again, who are you looking at? What are you looking at? Is Ryan right? Is it just time to hit the reset button and say, here's our new manager. Let's let him build his squad, and let's take a deep breath and just build.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've kind of all said it. Ryan said it. Sam has also said it. You've said it in your piece that we discussed earlier about cooking with another man's ingredients, I've mentioned it. He needs his own personnel. It's all well and good for a manager to come in and work with something that's been left, but it's literally like finding all the pieces of a car in a dumpster and then fabricating your own and welding your own car from that. And that's I'm obviously not calling our players dumpster players, but that's what he's done. He's come in after Emery, well, first of all after Wenger, after Emery, after Ljungberg's very short stint, and he's the new permanent manager, and he's got to try and build this squad. He's obviously now he can only work with what he's been, what he's got. He brought in Saliba and Cedric. And now, he obviously sees something in them to keep them permanently. He obviously saw Saliba and Cedric, Mari and Cedric, sorry. He obviously saw Mari when he was at City, and he knows what he's capable of. I mean, everyone's seen Cedric, for Southampton. Everyone knows what he's capable of. So he's brought those two in first and foremost. It's now about him scrapping what will not work and bringing in what will. You've got, as you said, the likes of Willow Saliba coming in, keeping Mari now, keeping Luiz, possibly having Malang Sarr, who can play left centre-back and left-back, covering Seo if he goes. You've got to look at, obviously, the likes of Thomas Partey. We said it before, Mark Roca, possibly Houssem Aouar. There's been a story recently that Lyon are sort of saying that under the dependency that if they lose Houssem Aouar, I think that's how you pronounce his name, they're going to look at Matteo Guendouzi. Arsenal would be stupid in the current circumstances that are surrounding Matteo Guendouzi not to say to Lyon, well, look, if you're looking at him and you're kind of already under the pretense that you're going to lose Houssem Aouar, let's do a swap deal. Let's do a swap. And it was mentioned yesterday, I think it was Ryan actually that said, would you take sort of a swap of Guendouzi and say 20-30 million for Aouar and Depay? I absolutely would. I'd do that in a heartbeat. But you've got to look at the likes of the defence coming in. You've got to look at the likes of the possible midfield. But yeah, you do have to, are we going to keep Ceballos? I mean, he has impressed. But today, again, he was another one that kind of felt, for me, was flat. And it was kind of like, well, these players always seem to, they get to that point of, I said at the top of the show, it wasn't flattering to deceive. But I've changed my mind. They're getting to that point now. If they go down, we're going, oh, wow, shiny new things. And then suddenly, no, same old, same old. So, yeah, I do feel he has to really look at this now. He has to really sort of focus, knuckle down, look at his back. And we know how good he is. He watches the drone footage in training. We know he goes back and looks at things. We know how sort of, minuscule details he pays attention to and focuses on, Arteta. So I don't think there's any doubt he will, if players need shifting on, he will shift them. And I do feel he's got the backing of the board. I do feel he's got the backing of the hierarchy. And I can definitely see, I'm hoping, a new look Arsenal come the start of that new season in a couple of weeks.
All right. And I'm going to use this moment to kind of tease a story that I'm going to be putting out in the next couple of days. But I want to give you kind of the blueprint. Those of you fans who have access or can look up, you like to scour the internet looking for this kind of thing. If you look at the roster and you look at the salaries, I mean, that's kind of a hidden thing. Everybody talks about the price tag of transfer targets. Everybody talks about how much money could we get if we sold Guendouzi, how much money could we get if we sold Kolasinac. Another thing to look at, and I've been fortunate enough to see kind of the salary structure of the current squad, look at who's making what. And there are a lot of what we'll call bad deals on the Arsenal books right now. And I'm going to use Kolasinac as one example. I mean, he's making, by what I've seen, 95,000 per week. And as we've seen, he's been supplanted. Kieran Tierney is the starter at left back, left wing back. But that's a bad contract. You're giving a guy that contract is, I believe, like the 7th or 8th largest on the squad. You can't pay that to a rotational, to a backup player. We were discussing the same thing with Hector, although Hector seemed to have had a good game today. He's a player who's up and down. He's making even more. But, is Cedric got a new contract. Cedric is making almost as much as him. Can you afford to be paying high salaries to two players where one is definitely potentially a starter and the other is the backup? Once we see that, you'll see certain players come up who say, it's almost like the salary dictates who's going in and who's going out. All right. So look for that. But let's talk about another point. Let's go back to that Lyon possible Guendouzi for Aouar swap. And again, there may be money involved. Ryan, you actually pitched a possibility where Arsenal could send some cash and Guendouzi and get Aouar back, and maybe Memphis Depay, who's also on the Lyon roster. But the value, and again, what's missing from, we talked about Ozil and his creativity, that club is clearly missing that. But something else we have to put on the front burner is that our midfield scores nothing. They give no support. We talked about the burden Aubameyang carries, the burden that Pepe's carrying now. Pepe seems to be stepping forward, but Arsenal needs to find some scoring punch. There is no Robert Pires on this roster, coming off the wing, scoring, pinging in a bunch of goals. There's nobody who's going to drive forward. We had that with Aaron Ramsey most recently. Nobody like that right now.
No, and I like the segue because I'm not sure or if anyone in the group knows, but I've got a video being released probably after the weekend about how Arsenal lack a creative midfielder. And I say it every week. There is a missing link between the midfield and the strikers. We just have nothing in between. The ball is getting pinged forward and it's dropping to the opposition's midfield in between that space. And we have no creative link in there. Ozil doesn't score goals. He does create a lot, but he doesn't contribute as much. And it's such a big thing in today's game where you need someone who can help the strikers score goals. And since Aaron Ramsey's left, I can't name someone who's got more than 3 goals for Arsenal's midfield. And that's diabolical. I think we have 5 goals.
There you go. I was going to ask how many total. I don't think Arsenal has half a dozen goals combined from the midfield this season.
Yeah, 5 goals between Ceballos, Ozil, Torreira, Willock, and Xhaka. But not only that, they only have 8 assists between them as well. So we've placed all our creative burden on Pepe, who's just adapting to the Premier League. And at Lille, he didn't need to do that job. His job was get the ball, finish it. And now he's had to adapt to a new system under Emery, and then he's having to adapt to another one with Arteta. So we don't have anyone who can create. And then Arteta's trying Saka in midfield, which didn't work. It's clear that we need an attacking midfielder. Coutinho, my man Grealish, Aouar, any of them, whatever we do, we need one of them big time, because we are suffering every game because of it.
All right, Dean, I'm going to ask you again. We've talked about Guendouzi. Is the objective now? It looks like he wants to leave, right? He's got value. He's a midfielder. He's young. Are we almost at the point where he's bait, and we think that we're going to put him out? He's got to bring somebody back in return who A, plays in the midfield, and B, fits Ryan's criteria. You've got to have an attacking mentality. You've got to have an eye for the goal and a desire and the ability to score yourself.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we've obviously got our plans in place. I feel we've already got, the certain kind of direction we were going to take in the market. But I feel the whole situation with Guendouzi has been a very small blessing in disguise. I say that because, he is a young lad. He is, you can say that he still needs to learn, but at 21, I've said this time and time again, I know youth players that are more mature than him. I just don't want to be too hard on him because he still is only 21. However, I do feel it's a blessing in disguise for Arsenal because, as you say, he has got value. He's got a lot of value. There are clubs out there that seem to think that they're better than us at handling, I guess, personalities. Arsenal under Wenger was one of the best clubs at handling troublesome kind of entities, bringing them in, calming them down, nurturing them, as it were. Would Arteta have that same philosophy? He's tried. I know a lot of players, Guendouzi was taken under the wing of both Lacazzet and Aubameyang. But it appears he's gone that that far down that some of these players are still that fed up. They don't even want to waste their time trying to nurture him now and trying to guide him. So I do feel it's best that he goes. It does look like now, considering he's not even offering an apology, he's refused to apologise. He pretty much mugged David Luiz off when David Luiz tried to talk to him. So what can you do? And yes, if you're going to dangle him in front of clubs like Barca, PSG maybe, Juventus, Real, Atletico, and then you've got players, Leon as well. You've got players like Aouar, Coutinho, Partey, players like that could be drawn in terms of having a deal like that. And if you've got someone like, for example, Mark Roca, who, is now worth, value-wise, it's gone down because of what's happened with, with his club and that, you're looking at them possibly, if they really want someone like Guendouzi, they're going to be giving you him and money, rather than, say, you going and giving Barca Guendouzi and money for Coutinho, or Leon Guendouzi and a little bit extra for Aouar or something like that. So there's a lot that can be done in that stretch. And I did say at the beginning that, when on the pod a few weeks ago, everything that's going on here could benefit us. But I definitely feel that situation with Matteo is something that we can definitely benefit from.
All right, we're coming up on the top of the hour, but I want to keep talking about, this rebuild, the spine, because it clearly looks Arsenal's trying to rebuild now in the middle. Obviously, they're trying to rebuild in the back line. Ryan, we talked about this. Actually, we talked about this way back, again, before COVID, about whether Arsenal needed a true striker, a target man, that kind. You were of the opinion back then that they didn't, but as we're watching Lacazzet in this kind of peculiar, is he a striker? Is he a midfielder? He seems to want to drop deeper and deeper and deeper game after game after game. We don't have anybody with the skill set, of the traditional target man. Somebody who can score with their head, or somebody who can play with their back to the goal in the box. The name Hudson Edwards come up. He seems, of all the targets we talked about, who fits that. Should Arsenal look at him, especially if a player like Lacazette's going out? Is that a variable in their striker set that they might want to pursue?
Yeah, I believe so, because he can do both roles very, very well. He can run in behind, can cause problems pace-wise, but he can also hold the ball up. He's a good target man. And the biggest thing, you heard me during the game moaning about Lacazette not being in the 6-yard box. He's always on the edge of the box, whereas Edouard, Nketiah, these type of forwards want to score goals in the 6-yard box. Every striker should be like that, whereas Lacazette just isn't doing that right now. And I know he scored a good goal today, but it still doesn't take the fact away from he's trying to be a midfielder. He wants to be a creative midfielder for some reason. And just to say about the profile that you mentioned, there's a couple others who are similar, like Osman, who is potentially going to Napoli or wherever. He could do that role. And one that has not been mentioned, as far as I'm aware, is Marcus Thuram at Mönchengladbach, the French striker. He is very tall. He's 6'2", I believe, quick, and he could do that role as well. And I think he'd be a little bit cheaper than Edouard. So anyone like that who can play as a target man or run in behind would suit Arsenal a lot better than what Lacazette is doing right now.
All right. You get the final say this week, Dean. Again, let's bring a name back, because we're now in the market, one foot in the market, one eye on the market, one eye on finishing this season. Coming into the match, we talked about Guendouzi of having real value. One of these happy, it's not happy what happened, but it is, a pleasant kind of come down that if he were put on the market, he had to be put on the market, that he's young, so he does have value. He can bring Arsenal a lot in return. Let's talk about another player who's in a similar position, Hector Bellerin, right? He had a better performance today, but we were hearing midweek that maybe he's another one of those players on the fence, but were he to be put on the market, would have high value. Based on what you've seen today, is he a shop window player, or has he proven that you should keep him? Or are we just going week to week with him, like so many others?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both, to be honest. I guess, week to week thing. See, I would never have thought that it would get to the point that Hector would be unconvinced, I guess, by Arteta's project, because that seems to be the noise now, is that he's apparently explicitly spoken to Sky Deutschland, like Sky in Germany. They say they've concretely spoken to Hector, and he has said he's going to leave because he's not happy. Now, whether I buy into that, I don't know. They don't seem to be a very unreliable outlet, Sky in Germany. Not really unreliable. But for them to make the point that they've specifically spoken to him and he said that, I don't know. I don't know what to think, because today didn't show that he didn't want to be there. He, like we say, everyone was kind of flat, but I felt he made some good runs. I thought he made some, but at the same time, as much as I love Hector, I do feel that, and I said it the other day, that Cedric's going to oust him anyway. So I think if we can get decent money for him, I feel Cedric and Ainsley can cover that right back / right wing back spot. And even later on down the line into the next season, Jordi Osei as well. Jordi Osei. So I do feel that side is relatively safe if that were to happen with Hector and he were to go somewhere.
Okay, stories to watch. Again, we don't have the best results to discuss, but we thank you for joining us on this Sunday for the North London Derby. We've reached the top of the hour, so we're going to reach into our time. But obviously, follow us on Twitter, follow us on our webpage, Say by the Bellerin on Sports Talk Line, and obviously come back and join us here for our pods, for our live chats. We appreciate your feedback. We love your comments. We want to see more of them. Bring your friends. So again, on this somber Sunday for me, I'm Raphael. He's Ryan. He's Dean. Let's hope for better news next time. Goodbye. Thanks for joining us.